Here we are. Welcome back to the Claw Palm. My name is the Ant-Man. To my left, Ross. Below him, Marshall. And Marshall hit me up the other day and said, hey, Dad was wanting to know when he could come back on. The answer to that is yes, because that's when you can come back on, Kevin. Anytime you want to be on the podcast, this is your home. Kevin Von Erich, welcome back to the Claw
Well, thank
Palm.
you, guys. I like coming on here, so I'm glad anytime you guys want me.
Had a great time with you. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's kind of feeling, is this still a false spring that we have going on in Texas right now?
I think so. We had it last year. Last year, we didn't really have the cold weather in March, and I was worried about it. But maybe this year will be the same because it's 70 degrees out there, and I don't think it's going to freeze again for another week.
My whole family disagrees with me, but man, every time the cold weather starts disappearing, we get these warm days, I go through this depression. I love the cold so much.
Do you really?
The hotter it gets, the sadder I get. And plus my AC is out of my truck, so that's another thing.
That's the real reason. We have boiled it down to the real things.
Yeah.
The AC in the truck.
Well, Dutch, if you were with me when I was a little boy, though, I guarantee you, living in Buffalo, New York, and in Indianapolis, and in St. Louis, where I was born, if I would have just been a week later, I'd have dual citizenship in Canada. It was freezing cold out there. You'd really love it up there.
Dang. I really do. And Ross knows, when we were in Japan, I think it was like, we first got there's like 32 degrees, and I'd get made fun of because I was walking around in flip-flops, and I love it so much. I don't know.
You like that? Wow.
Me too. I wear my flip-flops on the plane every to get to New York, foot of snow on the ground. But you know what? My feet are good for that.
I got the same foot situation, Dad.
We all have the same foot. Even the children, feel like we do too.
Uh-huh.
It's you barefoot guys. You're barefoot all the time.
It's good for you, man.
Today we're going to be talking about WCCW, breaking away from the NWA. I'll kind of give you a synopsis here real quick. On February 20th, in 1986, this is from WWE.com, a longtime affiliate of the National Wrestling Alliance, the World Class Championship Wrestling, headlined many of its biggest shows, of course, with Kevin or Kerry taking on Ric Flair for the illustrious NWA title. However, after recognizing that the championship was becoming a main part of Jim Crockett's Mid-Atlantic promotion, Fritz made the decision to split away from the NWA and establish his own title. With that, the World Class Championship Wrestling became World Class Wrestling Association, and Rick Rude was recognized as the first world champion in WCCW. Now, I want to kind of take you back just a few days, several days just before this happened. Gino Hernandez was discovered dead in his apartment, and it was just that was on the 4th and either the 18th or 20th. Some discrepancy on the time of the breakaway from NWA that happened. So a lot going on, and so that's a lot in front of the camera and a lot behind the camera as well. Jim Crockett decided he was not going to actually have Ric Flair wrestle in the state of Texas at all. So, Kevin, if your father didn't book a show in Louisiana or somewhere else, I guess there was no chance of Ric Flair even coming to be on the show. Tell us the importance first of what the NWA meant to wrestling as a whole back in 1986. What was NWA mainly responsible for then?
People don't realize that when you watch that movie and you hear Holt McCallum say, as Fritz Von Erich say, they always wanted to screw me, the NWA, Well, the truth was, my dad was president of NWA from 73, 4, 5. I'm not sure when it was, for quite a few years. And so, that's the truth to it. It was just, NWA is a great company, a great business and all, but you got to remember the climate back then, what it was like. We'd pretty much, wrestling had never been as big as it had gotten when we'd gotten into that. And we had a great TV rating, even higher than WWE up in New York. That's unheard of stuff. And every one of the promoters, there were good men out there, but every one of them had in the back of their mind, if they wanted to, they could come here and run a show and take our crowd. My dad never would have done that, ever.
Sure.
Never. I knew he wouldn't, but they weren't sure of that. And I believe that's a big thing with Vince, because Vince actually came down and met with us. We met out there at DFW at the big airport conference room out there. And Garibaldi, I believe, was there. Somebody, Australian guy, and whatever. I mean, David Manning was there with me. David Manning, me, my dad, and Vince, and Garibaldi, I believe, and a few lawyers. And Vince made us an offer on his business, to offer us, half of it.
Oh, wow.
And I think he was kind of worried about some of his talent back then. He maybe couldn't trust him, and he knew he could trust us.
Yeah.
But he figured that my dad could just snap his fingers and we'd come running. And we are a business family. We would have too, but it's because of the business. It's not like a bunch of dogs or something like that. But we loved each other, and I'll tell you that the movie was hard on my dad since it came up. But I want you to know, when you love your sons, you can kick their butts when they go wrong, when they do bad. And pretty much when you tell them not to do it, you're promising, if I find out you did it, I'm going to kick your butt, and that's what my dad was like. And
Sure.
I tell you, he spanked us with a big leather strap. And man, it was hard. I'm going to tell you, I was on your back, wherever he hit you, and you better not cry either. It was like being tough. That's how my dad didn't want to raise a bunch of sissies, and I didn't want to raise a bunch of sissies. That's why I brought these boys up like that. Same dang way. It's because I don't think my dad made a mistake at all. He wanted to raise good, responsible men that don't shirk away from responsibility or step up to a challenge, and that's what I wanted to do too. That's why I sent him to the hellhole on earth out there in that Japanese.
I wouldn't call it hellhole.
It was. I've seen the way they do those kids. I was watching them. They called it sparring, but they kicked this one kid in the face, and his teeth shot across the mat. I think they might have been showing off for me or something, but they're like that. They treat those kids like fodder, and they just annihilate them. But there's so many kids want to be wrestlers that they finally end up with a crew of good, hard men, but not by babying them. They treat them like rough. And my boys wanted to wrestle, and so I said, well, I know how one place you start. Yeah. And I knew that a lot of American guys had sent their sons over, and it was not, an easy thing at all. I don't think anyone lasted, but my boys did. They went over there.
I remember what you're talking about, the teeth thing. I remember when that happened. But real quick, just to go back, so the NWA, was it started in 1948? The NWA, it was around that time, right?
Man, I'd only be guessing, but I could tell you some stories that Sam told me about Ed Strangler Lewis and Joe Stecker and some of those early champions and Mighty Milo. Did y'all ever hear that story? Story of Mighty Milo.
Mighty Milo?
Sam, one of the first world champions, and back in the day, they weren't airplanes, it was steamships. If you wanted to travel, you took a ship. It's probably back in the 1900s or before that, before the 90s or 80s. But he didn't trust banks, and he was a European guy. He came to wrestle in America and wrestled, I think, Joe Stecker, one of those early champions. And he won, and that's where the gold belt came from, because he didn't trust banks. He wanted it in gold. And he went back home on his ship with that gold belt on. It was
incredible.
Gold. I mean, he made a belt for it. It was all gold. And I think that's what we got our tradition.
Wow.
But there was I don't know if it was torpedoed or it was a shipwreck or what, but he would not take that gold belt off, and he drowned out in that ocean with it.
What?
That's the story.
Wow.
Yeah. Sam told me that.
It's kind of poetic.
I know. Imagine defending that belt. Dang.
Uh-huh.
I know, your father, Fritz Kiffin was the president, as you mentioned. So what do you think, what do you believe that your father's hopes were in moving away from the NWA and being 100% independent?
Well, actually, Anthony, it wasn't my dad. It was Dave and me and Kerry, but primarily Dave and me had that dream for a long time to do a wrestling show that was just really violent, and really really energetic and a lot of high paced action stuff like
Sure.
we used to do. You know, we used to have it like that. And we wanted a show with 2 camera angles, you know, one always fixed on the action, so it'd be really easy to edit, you know.
Yeah.
And so, and then with the shotgun mics and all that, we liked all that. We loved the slow motion and the instant replay stuff. And
Right.
not a lot of companies can do that, you know, but,
Yeah.
you know, we wanted to kind of eventually get to the point where we were that good. We wanted it to be that way. So we had to, you know, it was a dream. It was something we'd hoped for. And we saw it coming, you know.
Yeah.
That did.
So, but you, sorry, go ahead. No, you're good.
I was going to say though. So did that when he was part of the NWA? The NWA, did they have any say over what he did at WCCW? Because I was wondering if that could be a reason why he left or was out or whatever, just because he wanted full control over his company, or did the NWA like kind of not overstep boundaries, but
I don't know, because I think that if they would have said something like, you know, if their attitude would have been, well, we don't want to help them because, you know, they're doing so well, then I could understand that. But then I can see Rick telling the NWA out there, to hell with you, I can make $40,000 in this show, and I'm going to go down there and do it, you know. And, so I don't think that sounded realistic at all. I'm not sure what it was, but you really have to know we were really a competitive business, and especially a company like that out there where they'd been around for so long and they're not used to losing, you know. And they're going to protect their business with all they got.
Let me ask you this, Kevin. Is that you said it was you, Kerry, David, who really kind of inspired this breakaway from the NWA? What you guys were wanting to do at the time, was it just so outlandish to the NWA that that you conflicted on how to run shows and how to shoot shows?
Well, a lot of the guys at the NWA are good friends of mine. In fact, Tully Blanchard and I are going to go talk to some prisoners here this weekend. And,
that's great.
When I get back, I'm going to go to Kauai, and when I get back, we're going to head out. But yeah, Tully, I have good friends there, but back then it was so competitive that I don't think we knew who we could trust, really. You know, about that belt and all. We didn't know we know they didn't have our best interest at heart, you know. And so that was probably the reason that my dad wanted to pull away. But it could have been other things too, you know, because in this business there are a lot of agreements men make that the other members aren't necessarily aware of, you know. And it could have been that too.
Hey, Dad, I was going to say, though, because I know you and you like Tully Blanchard a lot. Tully Blanchard's also going to be at the ranch March 23rd for the RCW show here at the Von Erich Ranch on the March 23rd.
Tully Blanchard's going to come out here?
Yeah, he's going to come out here. You're going to wrestle. I'm just joking.
Well, listen to this.
I'm just learning this.
Some of my earliest memories are Dad taking me fishing down in the bay down there, just me and Dad, and Joe Blanchard was always there. He was Dad's fishing buddy, and they were best friends. I know they were enemies later, but it was because, they were enemies because Joe ran opposition against us. But he and Dad were like tight, you know, buddies. And but you know, think about this: with any of your best friends, you know, if there's an awkward silence, you know, well, you're a really good best friend. There's no awkward silence, and I got a feeling that everybody was scared of my dad, scared to death of him, but Joe was his buddy, and I think Joe thought, I ain't scared of him, you know, and that's the way it went. But I remember him saying, real early in the morning, we were out there before daybreak, right at daybreak, and Joe is opening a beer and singing a song, you know, about, and my dad said, "Damn it, Joe, you can't sing worth a damn, so why don't you just shut up?" And he said, and it's too early to drink a beer too, you're drunk. And Joe said, "Oh, Fritz, I got to get that toothpaste taste out of my mouth." I just remember that. Yeah.
Get the toothpaste.
I got to get a beer and wash the toothpaste taste out of the mouth. Hey, Kevin, not only did you guys crown your own world champion, which we'll get to here in just a minute, but first I want to ask you, you also changed the name as well from WCCW to WCWA, or World Class Wrestling Association. Was that only for like the back end of changing it to World Class Wrestling Association for like a business part, or because everyone, even still today, calls it WCCW.
I know, even me, I do too.
There you go.
I don't know how that. Excuse me, I just got over being sick a little bit, but I always wondered how that worked out.
Yeah.
Because I had been going down into Mexico City quite a bit there from Mr. Anyway, down at Mexico City and Irapuato and Cuernavaca and Veracruz, and just worked all those South Country towns.
And they all knew it as WCCW.
Well, while I was working down there, must have been when they changed that because I always wondered what I thought we were world class, and to this day I call it world class wrestling, world class championship.
I love that name, man. It's I don't know. It's I was gonna say classy, but it's who thought of that name? Or you've told me this before, but
you know what? I've heard a lot of people take credit for it, but I can remember me and Dave sitting around or watching the Olympics one time, and they said, we've got 2 world-class wrestlers coming up in this next event. And I said, Dave, that sounds like what we ought to do right there. And or Dave said it to me, whatever, but we ran it by my mom. She loved it. Kerry, when he I believe he was on a track throwing the discus somewhere, he got back, and we ran it by Dad, and Dad liked the major leagues of professional wrestling. He wanted to call it, I think he would have been MLW.
MLW, yeah.
But he liked the idea, we told him we wanted all young guys. We wanted to make it look like a fight, and just earn the money. And I knew there'd be guys that would answer the call to something like that. And we were right. We were right, all right. Kerry, we all had lots of friends in the business too, especially Kerry and Dave, and then Gary Hart was a great, he knew a lot of people. And then I never want to leave off David Manning either. He had such a big part of it. He was such a good idea man. And he was really good at figuring out trends. I never was really sharp on following trends, but boy, he was good at that. He was something else. But it took a lot of people.
Yeah.
Let's see. Now, Rick Roode was crowned the very first world champion. He was the American champion when he was in the NWA, and that was the title. But Rick Roode became your very first champion. Why was Rick the right person to be the first champion outside of the NWA world champion?
Well, I always really liked Rick, and we were buddies, but we got sideways pretty good one time, and we had a little tangle, and it's a funny thing, after you have a little fight with somebody, later on you shake hands, you have a beer, and they wind up being really good friends, and that's how me and Rick were. We just really liked each other. He's hard to like Rick too, but God, I have so many good Rick stories, but they're all dirty. I can't tell you any of them. He was so funny, but did stuff. I mean, I can't believe he's doing this, And for me to say that, that's a lot. Rick was something with those girls. I mean, I can't even go into it. I don't know the people. I don't know his family and out there. But let me just say, he was an alpha male type guy, and women were for squeezing and loving and cuddling, and that's it. Give me some cuddling and get out of here. That was Rick's attitude.
I would say Rick was probably thankful that there was no TikTok or Instagram back then.
Oh man,
well, I think all of the wrestlers are happy about that, man. If there was that much, I mean, I don't know. Some stuff's left best unseen, unsaid, but I want you guys to remain my heroes. If some of the stuff got out of what was going on in the locker rooms, in every locker room,
Yeah, the entire 80s is.
You're right. I'm glad for the change because. The way we used to live was pretty darn dangerous. I mean, we'd go to the show. First, you drive 3, 4, 5 hours. You get to the town, you work, and then you go to the bar, and or meet girls or whatever. But you're always going to be riding with a couple of 6-packs, and
Sure.
You're drinking beer all the time, and you're staying up real late at night, and you're exerting so much from your body, and you're not really putting the good food in there to
Yeah.
replace it. And so there were a lot of injuries and a lot of depression and things
I'm
like that,
sure.
because it really does. It wears on you, and it wears you down. You don't know, why can't I move? I'm so sore. And you're always stiff until you get in that ring. You take a couple of backdrops, you get slammed, you feel great again for maybe 8-9 more hours, and then you're stiff again. And that's how it all, week after week, nickel a bump. That's what they say.
That's why I have so much, grace towards wrestlers. I mean, wrestlers that are addicts, just because back in the day, these guys, they had to work. If you don't work, you don't get paid. And, it's being a wrestler, it's constantly, Band-Aid fixes on your body. The physical therapists that are involved in, or any athletic trainer involved in wrestling, they're constantly going against what they were taught, because they're telling a wrestler, okay, the right thing to do would be rest, but that's not an option. So we're going to try to work around this. And it's working injured, being smart about working injured. But then you start compensating, and then you got a new injury coming, and so these guys didn't know what to say. And if you tell somebody you're injured and the promoter hears it, it'll screw you up. And so these guys are just,
or if the fans
pills,
are,
being quiet.
Yeah, that's the thing too. It's like, and we're not eating right when you're back in those days. All the boys. I'm talking about all of them. There was a lot of, not a lot of money was being made for a lot of the guys, and so they'd have cans of tuna in their bag and Vienna sausages and beef jerky, and that was really, what you're putting out in that ring and what you're putting back in your body should be about the same. And nowadays, the reason I said I'm glad for today is because I see men in the dressing room. They don't do drugs. No one does drugs. It's such a competitive business. All the men are sharp, and clear-headed, and determined to make a better future for themselves. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is. I've waited for this day. Yeah.
You almost give social media credit for that, because now it holds everybody accountable.
Probably.
You mess around now.
Yeah,
maybe so.
Rick Roode, your first champion. So now you've broken away from the NWA. You have your own world champion, although it may not be recognized yet by all the other groups, but it's your own, and you really just care about your own at that point. You're making bank when it comes to ratings and television, and things are going great for the company. How much did it change having your own world champion and being able to do what you wanted to do, Kevin?
That's a good question.
I'm going to really say it didn't help us. It didn't help us that much looking back on it, because the champion is in the people's minds. The people have a mind who the champion is, and if you say somebody that's not up there with them, then it's not going to really. It's just going to be a show, and like that's kind of just the way it is, because it goes against the cardinal rule of wrestling. Wrestling was always the heels travel and baby faces stay home. There's a local baby face, and the heel travels around and beats him up. But maybe he'll win every now and then. But the thing is that with the business kind of became a place for the Von Erichs, where we were actually traveling baby faces, and that was really just hadn't happened before. It was that crossover crowd. Little kids and girls and all that.
How was the demographic before you and your brothers really got in, when it was, because how long did Granddad run the Sportatorium in particular? How long was he running shows before you or Uncle Dave came in?
Well, shoot, he'd been doing it our whole lives, down at the Sportatorium.
At the Sportatorium? Really?
Yeah, the Sportatorium. And then in Fort Worth, it was at the Northside Coliseum. It was an old rodeo arena, and that's where the cheesecloth was, and that's where Kerry and Dave and I would be back there watching Dad, and when we'd hear the people booing, we knew Dad was winning, and when they were cheering, that we knew Dad was, getting beat up. Yeah. And so it was the opposite for us, but it was so painful to watch your dad get his butt kicked out there, and he never begged. My dad never begged like I see a lot of heels do, but he took me to Japan with him one time, and got in the ring, and he was wrestling with Inoki, and Inoki starts his comeback, and my dad held his hand up like, "No, please."
Oh no!
And I was sitting right there, and I just like, it felt like it took 5 years off of me.
You can't unsee that.
And I was
I
was only 12, so that knocked me back to 7.
Oh.
And so I got back to the dressing room. I said, "You begged, Dad. You begged him." I said, "Dad, I had so much respect for you until I saw that, Dad. You begged." And he said, "Oh, son, he was really getting me."
Oh
I
no,
said,
he
"Oh,
didn't, man.
Dad, he was."
He let you think
said,
that
"Was
about
it-
him?
Granddad's
you just-
mature. I'm like, no.
No. He didn't tell me. I just had to get used to it.
That shows how confident Granddad was. He was confident
I
enough
forgot
in
it.
himself.
I made myself forget it. That's what I did.
Yeah.
Man. Well, yeah.
Wow.
I guess watching your dad beg, you can't unsee that. But luckily for Ross and I, our dad won most of the time. But street fight, that's another thing. My dad would beg all the time on the side of the road.
You can have the lane, sir. I don't. Oh man.
Hey, buddy, this is between me and the lady. Step back.
Yeah, me and the kid.
Dad, there was one funny story that you did when we were kids. It involved a lady, but this girl was getting so aggressive, and she didn't know who you were, if you're a boy or a girl, but getting really aggressive. Anyways, forced you to pull over. And then you got out of the car and you acted so frightened that you fell on the ground, and she felt sorry. She was like disgusted by you.
Yeah.
And Ross and I were laughing so hard. We were so
He's just trying to make us laugh and just.
Yeah, anytime a lady honks at me, I try to do a little show like that.
Yeah, or my least
But
favorite.
there's another one. We were walking to one of your programs at school, and
a parent-teacher conference. I remember that.
Yeah, and so we can hear click, 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 running. She was late. She wanted to get there, and she was running up behind me. And so I thought I'd just make a joke out of it. So I turned around real fast and said, "Take my money, just don't hurt me." She said,
Oh, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, sir, no,
Yeah.
I wasn't going to hurt you."
"Yeah."
See,
that
she has
was
a
funny.
Kevin Von Erich story for the rest of her life. Like, I don't care what she does. That guy's a wimp.
That's right.
Take the children, just don't hurt me.
That went over great the next day at school. That was awesome.
I went over great.
It was so funny though.
did.
She cracked up laughing. It was really
Pro
funny.
wrestler reputation didn't look good that day.
Yeah.
You really are wimps, man.
So what?
That's funny. Well, we one time every month, it looks like now, that's what we'd like to do is revisit something from the past in World Class Championship Wrestling, and want to get what some of you guys would like to hear for next month's in March. Several things happened in March, and we could lay those out, but what is something you would like to hear Kevin talk about here on the Claw Pod that happened in March? So you might check that out, drop a note, a comment here on this podcast, and let us know, and we'll talk to Kevin about it and see if we can't get him back on, twist his arm a little bit. I mean, we know, or we could just have some lady run up behind him and tell him he needs to be on the podcast.
Yeah,
If it's the right one.
yeah.
She's the right one. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Kevin, thank you again for being on today, and thanks for chatting.
My
with us
pleasure,
about
guys. It was a lot of fun, and I'll be glad to do it again next time. So,
Absolutely.
Goodbye,
Let us know
everybody.
what you think. Leave comments here on this episode, and make sure you like and subscribe. We'll see you next time on the Claw Pod. See you later.